Good night, folks, and good day. I hope you all are well. Welcome to a very special cast tonight. And
Yeah, I don't like special episodes.
I mean,
you know how special
welcome.
episodes
How about welcome to our first
weird.
non-tennis episode?
Yes. We'll end up doing more, right? No, I'm just teasing.
Yeah, but I'm sure somebody will interweave some kind of intersectionality about tennis in here somehow.
Sure.
No, oddly enough, there are no real black men. Well, actually, we will get to tennis in here. I'm sure we will. Welcome to our tennis podcast, the We Are Realz Tennis Fans podcast. And we decided, as we spoke about last podcast, we decided we're going to take up the issue or the discussion on the 13th film documentary by Ava DuVernay, which is just streaming on Netflix. If you have that app streaming, whatever, we all watched it. Janina, Andreen, and myself watched it, and we felt compelled to have a discussion. And we thought, why not invite our buddies and our friends and fans and haters and trolls out there into the Intersphere and in our Twitter, in our podcast world. And we always have some fiery debates and discussion. Our fans are never afraid to tweet us and let us know how they really feel.
Tony is already throwing shade. Hasn't all of 2016 been a non-tennis episode?
Oh, look.
Shady bits.
Look. Tony. Don't let me grab you by the edges, Tony. Don't let me grab you by the edges.
You're about to snatch that weed, boy.
It's so sad. And we keep referring to 2016 as like a special year in tennis. Why is that the year that Monfils makes the World Tour finals?
Oh my God.
You know what? Look, we gotta say this for Sunday.
Yeah, we'll talk about that on Sunday, right?
I know. I thought of that this morning. I started chuckling.
But let me just give a little tweet out there. I was surprised by that fact. I was just like, really? What?
Don't worry, Tony. We're not going to snatch your wig just yet. I have a feeling it's coming, though.
Just yet.
All right, let's get going, though.
But anyway, so we are here to discuss the thing. And, usually it might not be as jovial, as funny as ours, but we'll try to do our best we can because this is a rather serious topic, though all of our topic is serious, but I guess this none more than the other. And I would try to get, before I go, let me introduce, and for those who don't know us, let me introduce my two hostesses with the mostesses. I'm nothing without these ladies. We have first Andreen from Solely Tennis Travel.
Hello.
We have the Cato Killing of all podcasts, Janina from Ohio.
Hey.
And there's Realz, which is me.
Mm-hmm.
Who is, the only man on the podcast. Yeah.
A mystery.
Anyway, ladies, so we decided that we were going to have this discussion. I think we spoke it amongst ourselves. We usually have a lot of talk outside of the podcast, surprisingly. I don't know how we find the time because we spend a lot of time on the podcast itself, but apparently we do. And we, as I said, we decided we're going to do this. And it's very, me personally, I was very excited because I felt that, I had a lot of feelings to a very uncommon thing for me. And, I wanted to...
He's alive!
Every once in a while, something clicks and jingles somewhere in my chest area. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this feeling? And I thought it was like, like, hey, why not put it out there, as I said. So I know that, let me sort of like bring us out of an overview. I think I told Janina I wanted to sort of like put a little perspective. So the documentary itself, which is I think by and large everyone would agree that it's an excellent documentary by all documentary standards. It basically starts in timeline in American history around 1865 in the post-Civil War era, in the Reconstruction era, where the Ku Klux Klan sort of like give rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. and they sort of like showed that movie, The Birth of the Nation, which incidentally I do own that DVD. Not with Nate Parker, but the original Birth of the Nation. But I thought that something I thought was sort of important for us to understand is the history of how all of this sort of come about. So I would say that the New World, which is basically the Americas, sort of like came into European existence with the crossing of the Atlantic, the accidental crossing.
Wait. What are you talking about? What are you doing? What do you mean? What context are you giving?
Hold up. I'm trying to give you context.
I'm like, wait. What are you talking about?
Oh, wait a minute.
I am not. Andreen is shutting you down.
Bear with me one moment.
Sorry, I'm not. I was just like, wait, what? Where? New World? Where are we going?
I thought of a historical context.
Okay.
Historical context.
Sorry.
Bear with me one moment.
Okay.
Not all the time, Realz, it's crazy. Look, see, this is why we never have nice things. There are probably new people listening, and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with these people?
Sorry.
But anyway, that's how we do it here.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway,
it's okay.
So basically, one of the things that I think it needs to be understood, I think, in a larger point is the idea of racism and sort of like slavery, because it's one of those things people talk about. Oh, slavery is dead. Like people are not slaves anymore. Like, why are you talking about racism? We live in a post-racial world, and those are things that are constant talking point that even come up. Even there's even a movement today to sort of like reframe slavery as they were workers. They were being paid. Actually, let me not say it's being reframed. I should say, it's being pushed as slavery being, like sort of like a workers' comp. They were getting food and clothing and shelter, so it wasn't all that bad. And some masters were really nice to slaves. I'm gonna call bullshit and all such sort of talking. Whatever the case.
What are you doing? Come on.
Anyway,
come on.
Anyway, but we're not just having our own. Anyway, so one of the things that
I think it's best to stay focused on the movie, because I think it'll help you guide through the discussion. Because, I mean, this question you're bringing up now about whether racism exists and I think that is actually dealt with in the movie. So we have to kind of like, I think we can use the movie to move through some of these topics, no?
Well, I'm not this. Okay, let's start with the movie. I guess in some movie we'll go backwards and then go forward. Okay.
Yeah, because I think we should start with unpacking the movie, and then some of the points that I think you're trying to make won't need to be made in that way. You can sort of reference the movie, because I just want us to all be in the same place, in terms of them having seen the movie. We ask people to watch it. I think we can refer to that.
Okay,
and,
fair enough.
And you know what I mean? I think then your point will actually be clear, because I think that's like a thesis, I think, in the movie on some level. So
the beginning of the documentary sort of like places, like I said, towards the end of the Civil War and with the birth of the nation, how that sort of like re-galvanized the Ku Klux Klan, which at some point somehow died out, and sort of like re-energized them in what is known historically as the Reconstruction era, basically when the South was basically reconstructing itself, but more importantly, where the ex-slaves or former slaves were now, and their children were basically now sort of like free life for themselves. And one of the interesting that happened during that period is that political power, black people gained political agency. Black men were given, that's supposedly literally, black men were given the power to vote, and they literally voted. They were in the Senate, in the Congress, in state government. All of this happened quickly within the first 35, 40 years after slavery. So within that period, before the 1900s rolled around, black people were in Congress and these things are happening. But then that sort of caused a backlash. And within that, rolls out, I think that's where the documentary basically started. The Ku Klux Klan sort of came into being, and the birth of the nation.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about exactly what it is. I mean, it's called 13th. And the reason behind that is it is about the 13th Amendment. So let's talk about first exactly what that is, because without that, none of this matters, right?
More or less, I guess.
Yeah. So the 13th Amendment says that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That's what the 13th Amendment says. And this was, pushed into law in 1865. So at that point, the black man is supposed, we're post-slavery, and here you are given equal rights in the eyes of the people at that time. Yes?
More or less, as you said. Well, I mean, that is important because, in essence, the 13th Amendment ended slavery in America, except the part that is often overlooked, hence the reason for the documentary, is the part where it says we can use slavery as a punishment.
It's a loophole.
Well, yes, basically.
The 13th Amendment has a huge loophole in it because it tells us that we're not going to hold slaves anymore except as a punishment for crime. So there's your loophole. You're a criminal, therefore you can be enslaved. Because what this is really about is the history of mass incarceration of this country.
Is that how you perceive the documentary? Is that you? What do you think is the central thesis? What do you both think is the central thesis of the documentary?
For me, as I watched it, I said this to Realz privately and he laughed at me, but I think the best way to sum this up is the evolution of slavery. And it's not gone. It's still here. It has just reinvented itself several times. And this documentary shows us exactly how that has happened throughout history. And it's shocking. It's unsettling. It left me feeling sad. It left me feeling angry. It left me feeling a little bit hopeless about some things. That's my overall feeling about everything. I mean, it truly, for me, is just an evolution of the slavery of people of color in this country.
Why did you laugh, Realz? Why did you?
Oh, I don't think I Janina, now you're telling stories. You made it seem like I was laughing at you.
No.
I laughed. No, I'm joking. I laughed because, I had that same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that, I felt, oh, for fuck's sake, there is just no getting out of this situation. And it's not, I wouldn't necessarily see the evolution of slavery per se, because I think what I was trying to point out in the beginning when trying to give some context is that it's the evolution, it's the reshaping and the reshifting and the reconfiguration of racism and the racist sort of like attitude and its effect on society. That in many ways we sort of like frame racism as basically being, I just don't like what certain set of people because of the color of their skin. But racism has been shown to be much more than that. Racism is basically an economic principle, an economic factor, and because in every single aspect of where racism lies, particularly in American society, there has always been a profit to be made from enforcing racism and racist trope.
Yes.
So whereas in the 1865, Americans love to celebrate war and we have ended slavery and this great scar and burden upon our nation is now gone and we fought the Civil War. We basically hurt ourselves. I know some people like to say, we fought within ourselves and destroyed ourselves to end this wicked. In fact, you didn't. It was basically historians will tell you there's a economic theory within there, and even today, it continues to reshape and reshift itself. There's always money involved in it.
Well, there is always money involved, but we have to be real and understand that as it continues to reshape itself, it's a bunch of backdoor dealings.
But wait. I think we have to be careful when we say it, because I think what's interesting, one of the interesting contentions in the movie is not to say slavery still exists, because I think that belies the very idea of what slavery was. I do think that there's this notion, though, that the idea and the systems that are in place, which are built and founded, I guess, on racist notions, will continue to evolve and take shape in new ways, because there's that fundamental belief, I guess, underpinning all of it, that we are fundamentally different in some ways. right? So like this is where you were giving that context of sort of racism, right? So the idea is that if I can make you foreign or different enough, then whatever system crops up will actually make sense, and you yourself might even participate in it, right? And so then in that, I think that's one of the things that's that beginning through line where we start with the birth of a nation. Like, let's give context to who these freed men and women are now. Right.
Yeah,
so it's like, yeah, because I think that's that piece, right? That's that vital piece where it's like,
well,
okay, well,
you know what? I don't want to call it different. I want to call it what it is. They're making people feel inferior.
Well, I mean,
you're putting
the
government, the people of power in this country are trying to keep minorities, specifically Black people at this time, inferior. That's what they're doing. I don't think there's any way around that.
Well, no, I don't argue that, but I'm just saying that's the central tenet, right? The central tenet is that your inferiority makes slavery possible, and your inferiority makes imprisonment possible.
It's the justification of it.
Yeah, basically. It's the justification of it. It's the baseline. It's the basis of it.
Well, let me tell you something that I learned from this documentary from right at the beginning, because I wasn't aware of this. I've never seen Birth of a Nation. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm supposed to be ashamed of that or if I'm...
No, you're not.
I mean, I don't know. I've never seen it. So,
let's just start off by saying, I think unless you're like supposedly a massive film buff, those are the only people who should feel guilty that they haven't seen it, because supposedly it is the start of film, right? So,
well, and we all know that's not me.
That's not you. So you're
that's so not me.
Well, no, I mean, Birth of a Nation.
What I did learn from that was, from according to this documentary, that this was a prediction of how race relations would operate in the U.S. Responsible for how the KKK started to behave. I had no idea that, burning crosses wasn't something that they did and came up with on their own, but that this was something that was done for the dramatic effect of film, and then they adopted it. Like someone gave this to them. I had no idea. And I thought, wow, that's, that was a shock to me.
Well, what is, that is not, that was that bit of information, but the overall that they were copying art, that wasn't really a surprise to me, because much of some of their tenants isn't even like all American, is from Asian, like the what's that thing called? One of the things that they love, the Nazi, what you call it, swastika. A part of that lies within East Asian culture. So much of their tenants is just copying from somebody else. It's just like
this cobbled together idea.
Yeah, cobbled together idea, because because it's so illogical. It's so irrational. There's no real base to much of this thing. But you see, this is what I've found, like watching this film, and also generally my own study and understanding of history, is just that much of this is just fake. It's just bullshit. It's just a spin doctor selling this garbage to poor people, Black and white altogether, so that the rich money people can control it.
What is it?
Can keep on making that money and keep on, because one of the interesting things that keep remain in power. Because the idea is that, look, if you think about it, society is structured in a pyramid, right? The rich people, the 1% is on top, and then the poor people at the bottom. Why is it that like the poor people constantly, we are larger in numbers, right? We are constantly told majority rules, but that is not the case. It's minority that basically rules, in the sense that like a few people make the decision and trickle it down to us, and whatever the case may be. So how are you going to keep people in control? How are you going to control people? You certainly can't do it by force. Generally, by whipping everybody, it won't be. You just don't have enough manpower. So there has to be a sort of like a psychological strategy to this system.
Yeah.
And that's basically how all of this sort of like comes up. So there is no real science to racism. It's just this notion that is pushed forward. And then people believe, because, when we're all poor, when we're all hungry at the table, somebody needs to feel different and special. So you say, you know what? You're better and special than that other person because of the color of your skin. It's inherent within you. You have that special genetic natural thing. They're inferior. And despite the fact that all of you hungry and all of you can be fighting that one man with the bread, you decide, you know what? Nope. I'm going to fight him and make sure he can't get the little piece of crumb that man is going to throw to me. So that's kind of like how I see that, that in my mind, I'm sure supposed to be racism is just full of fucking shit. It's just nothing scientific. There's nothing logical. There's nothing rational to it. But yet, it still exists. It still permeates through the society because it is a profitable venture. Because wherever there is racism, there is someone making tons and tons of money from it.
Yeah. So let's first of all remember that we're live and we have people interacting with us. And Lovely Drama Girl says that she did actually see Birth of a Nation, and she's surprised that to hear that so many people have been left feeling hopeless watching this. Contributes that to her knowledge of reading slave narratives, and she feels that maybe she braced herself for what was she was going to see because she'd read so many devastating accounts from the past. And also she agrees with you and backs you up in saying she has a friend who is of Indian descent who has a hard time with the Aryan, the concept of that being from Indian culture and how it's big white supremacist culture. I didn't know that. I didn't know that till right now. I had no idea that came from somewhere.
Yeah, much of it is they're just pulling from some mythology and even like this whole like Nordic sense of the blonde and blue eye madness. It's just like myth that they just pull out of thin air and just like sort of like cobble together and be like, oh, this is what the perfect person is supposed to look like. Where did that fucking idea come from? Clearly it can't be, because they're people of other different colors and whatever, and they're functioning just the same like you are.
Right.
But you make up a story, and the story carries around, and you keep preaching it and telling people, and look at the infinite. Because one of the things coming from a different culture, coming to America, which is a multicultural, one of the things I quickly noticed is just that I have more things in common with people than I have. So this whole idea, like, oh God, we're so different, it's just like, oh, that's not so different. No, we're not.
Yeah. When you take the time to learn, you realize that people are, in general, a lot the same.
Well, I do think, I mean, if we go back to the documentary, I think what was really valuable about this notion is how insidious it is to craft an ideology around criminality and around like essentialism, right? Because basically what you have is you now have a population of people who are now free, right? They're theoretically free to move around, free to move from north to south. Or south to north. And so you now have a system, you want to create a system of control. But what I think is really valuable is this idea, though, that you have to kind of excavate where these ideas are coming from, where this idea of criminality comes from, and how much of it do you really believe, right? How much of it do you really sort of subscribe to? Because I think that was what was so powerful and compelling to me. One of the themes in this documentary for me is this idea of, where did your notion of criminality come from? Where did you start to figure out or feel that someone was born a certain way? Because I think, if you think about it in contemporary culture, there's definitely the sense, there's no innocence for Black people, right? That's one of the things we talk about in other spaces all the time. We always talk about what is the age when a person of color is no longer innocent, right? You're a cute baby, but there's something that's switch off or switch on for you.
I think as soon as you're able to move. I think when you think about it, when you do the research in terms of like how the statistics are showing like children of color in kindergarten are facing harsher punishment, etc. I think it's that ability to move when they're able to walk for themselves and probably to express some sort of idea and probably to say no. That becomes when their innocence is lost.
Well, yeah, right.
That's when you just
and then you think about Clint. Then there's that there's that major moment in the documentary where they talk about the Clinton moment, where she talks about sort of super predator, right? And you see that stems from a long historical line.
Mm-hmm.
That starts.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk about what actually, what happened. So we had the 13th Amendment in 1865, and now all of a sudden you have these free people who were not free before, and the white people in power, they don't know what to do with them. They don't know what to do. So we have this loophole in the 13th Amendment that says we can't enslave people anymore. But if they're criminals, then we have the right to basically enslave them. So then we turn from having traditional slaves who are bought and sold, and you're going to work for me, and you're going to work for free, and I own you, to this whole idea of the criminalization of Black folks.
Well, I think something that the documentary sort of like, I don't want to say missed, but I think something that it's sort of like, you have to consider several things happening right here. Because one, slavery was perpetuated within slavery. For none of the slavery to sort of work, you had to compound this racist notion, right? Black people are inferior, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that was happening was that poor white people were known, to a certain extent, were in sort of like same, when slaves were now free, they were in the same economic situation. They were poor, they were landless, because the majority of the property was not owned by all of white people. Like, it was continued to be owned by 1%. So you have this notion going out and whatever. So at the beginning, right after the end of the Civil War, basically, blacks and white were working together. In fact, this was happening even before the Civil War. Bacon Rebellion. It's where black and white people were working together, and then they said, you know what? Nope. We're going to fix the situation. We have to divide and conquer. So you tell white,
because we know who's in power.
Right. You tell poor whites you are better than blacks.
Yes.
This is an opportunity.
You see people rising up, and you want to stop that, because if you want to look at it just from a pure theory standpoint, whoever's in power wants to stay in power. And you're going to do everything you can to stay in power, regardless of who you are, what your situation is. That's what you do. So then we get this systematic thing from the top down of our country that says we got to shut this shit down, basically. And we start to criminalize the Black people.
But there's something, in order to make this machine go, you have to grease it. And it can only be greased.
Yeah.
It can only be greased with poor people.
Yeah,
that's where the body is.
Yeah,
and fear.
That's where I go back to, because one of the interesting things that happened when I'm watching the documentary, and as I'm reading Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, this idea of criminality, there are no numbers to back it up. It is based in fiction and not fact.
Fantasy.
But if you listen to so-called, if you want to listen to the politicians who are trying to push all this rhetoric, they're going to tell you that the crime rate is going up. But what was really happening was
the crime rate was going down.
The crime rate was going up in some aspects. However, it wasn't a certain group of people. Our population as a country was growing. We had this huge baby boom after World War II. Then the baby boomers are adults, and the population in general rises, and therefore the crime rate rises. But everything was happening basically the way it's supposed to, the way you would expect it to. But, the people in power were telling everyone else it's the Black folks.
Well, isn't this a question that you raised at some point in time, Realz, about in the 60s, there was actually sort of discussion about eliminations of prison, right?
Right. It goes back to this sort of like, but again, with the 60s, you have to understand what's happening in the 60s, right? And it's the same thing that happened after the end of the Civil War.
Yep.
Not only do you have a bunch of, because with the end of slavery, right, what's happened is that Black people, Black men, and I mean this specifically to gender, can vote.
Yeah.
They can now vote. They have political power.
Yeah.
And they can also exercise their right to whatever the case may be. But the idea is to stem that, right? To control that aspect. What's happening in the 60s is the civil rights era. People are acting up. So what do we then do? Because we don't want this situation. Because there have been many incidents of civil rights protests. But what happened when the interesting happened in American civil rights is that it was able to get on TV.
Yes.
International journalists came to America, and then it was showing, and it's like, oh, you know what? This looks bad. So how do we deal with this problem? We start saying that these people are the criminals.
Yep.
These people who are peacefully protesting becomes a criminal. Wink, wink. This sounds rather familiar, doesn't it?
Right?
Because it's happening right now.
Well, because you also have laid the groundwork. I mean, I think what's important too is that because you've had this legacy and this language that's been sort of inculcated in academia, probably in fine institutions about criminality, right? Because I mean, in all of the sociological traditions, I've always seen this notion of criminality associated with people of color. We've always been seen as off, right? So it's like it's not like that much of a leap to then because I think this is when Nixon's policies make the most sense, right?
Right.
But that's what I'm saying.
Right. This is when the shift happens, according to the documentary and in quarter what we know is like this is when the shift has to happen. So you have to define the chaos of the 60s in one way that makes sense for people.
Right. Because then you have to, so that way, and again, this is what I'm saying, you know how to grease the monkey.
Yep.
Who did it talk to most of the time? Who is this coded language for? It's not for the rich people. It's not for them. It is for the poor whites.
Right next to you.
Because you know, one of the interesting things that people, I think I saw someone said it best recently, just like, oh, white people love those 3 quotes from Martin Luther King. But they overlook the fact that one of these, just as Martin Luther King was shot, the thing he talked about most was not I have a dream, is the economic disparity, it's the poverty in America, which didn't just affect black people, it affected people of color. And even white people, and even earlier back, as soon as the end of slavery, that became the problem. Poverty was happening for everybody. Everybody was poor. For the majority of Americans were poor. So the code language, Birth of a Nation, was not for rich white folks. Birth of a Nation was for the poor common white man to tell him, look, you are under this. Just don't get confused. Black people are animals. Black men are animals. You cannot be like them. So you don't have any common call. You don't have any commonality. You can't join together politically. You can't join together socially. Because just imagine, if 2 people just shooting this shit, then 2 people, no matter what color, are going to be like, you know what, shit, we're both poor. Let's try to get our shit together.
Right.
What can we do? Right. But then you have,
which is a possibility, which is a very strong possibility in the 60s, right? I mean, it's impelled by the fact that these folks didn't want to go to war, but it's
in
always
America.
been. Yes, there always was. Because,
it's always been there.
Well, but that's why they created the laws that said white people should not mix with black people, and it was essentially
exactly. So you can't.
Because
and the easiest way to do that is to then tell them from the beginning. It's just like, you are not the same.
You're almost better than them.
Now you're almost better than them.
Well, because at the end of the day, what they needed was that poor white vote. And those, they needed those racist people to come on their side. Because let's be real. No, they did. Because before all of this, you know, people don't want to acknowledge it so much, but you know, it's been said time and time again. All you have to do is go back and look. The Democratic Party of today is the Republican Party of past.
Yeah,
the Democratic Party used to be composed of all the crazy racists in the Ku Klux Klan. They had a huge percentage of
that is true, but
yeah, it's true. So at some point, the Republican Party had to say, we're not winning. We've got to get these people. And they went in and they recruited these people.
Which people?
I mean, we can't ignore that. The poor white racist people. Yeah.
I think we need to qualify something.
Yeah.
Hold on. I want to say something here. I mean, I'm not discounting your opinion, but original theory. In my head, racism is an economic and a socioeconomic thing.
Compulsion.
So it isn't that they were recruiting racist white people. What they were doing was making poor white people racist.
I don't know about that.
They were pushing.
No, I gotta disagree with that. They absolutely. All you had to do is go back.
Wait.
Look.
Make your point.
Let me finish.
Okay.
Every point historically, there's always been a moment in American history from the very beginning, and white people have been able to work together in great accord. They were about to accomplish great things. Yep. Before slavery became big and massive,
the
white
indentured,
people, poor
right?
white people, and the indentured and Africans were working together on plantation. There was no fight, there was no strife. But when cotton became king, then people decided, let's make slaves. Then the poor white people be like, you bring black people over here and chattel slaves. We're no different from these people. Then the rich white man says, you know what? Yes, you are better than these people. Let me give you a little job. You're the overseer. You're overlooking these people. You're better than these people. You overlook these animals. So that's what I'm saying. It isn't people you have to be taught to hate, basically. You
absolutely do. But we also have to realize that this is a political structure in this country.
Exactly. But it is also political device.
It was intentionally sought out to go get these people.
There's always money to be made.
Yes, and power. And so at one point there was this huge shift between the Republican and the Democratic Party and what they were composed of, because it used to really be reversed in a lot of ways.
Right, that is true. But I mean, my point is to say that
you know what, the reversal to me has never struck me as some sort of
never been clear.
Well, but I mean, it's clear. But I think when people say, "Oh, well, we used to be Republicans," I mean, that doesn't really matter to me, because all that happens is that there was a demographic shift and the ideology shifted, but the ideology was always there. Right, so it's like, okay,
no. There's more than that, though. There's more.
What I'm saying is, though, people talk about it as if it's some sort of grand realignment in some way that meant where a new idea was introduced. I think that it's similar to what's happening now. Think about the Democratic Party as it is now. The Democratic Party as it is, it has embraced ideologies that are far more Republican than its own founding, the current Democratic Party, which is why you could look at Hillary Clinton and go, she is Republican light, so what I'm saying is that it is possible for you, and historically that's always happened within the American tradition, right? It's like things will happen culturally, demographically, and a certain shift will take place and party alliances will move, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you used to be the party of Lincoln. Well, name-wise.
But we need
you were.
We need to understand, though, that the Republicans of that time sought these people out. They did. I mean, that's not...
Wait, you have to say, when you say these people sought, which people? You mean like the Southern strategy? Strategy. Well, yeah. I mean, be essentially what happened. Well, yeah. I mean, and in some ways, isn't that sort of what's happening now? It's like, listen,
absolutely, it is.
You are aware that the demographics in the country are changing. I mean, this is. I mean, if you think of this moment, right? The people of color far outpace in terms of birth white folks. The numbers are going to be changing. So you have to ask yourself, how are these party platforms going to shift and change to reconcile themselves with that? The numbers are just not there. There's not enough white people in this country to decide the vote. Right. That's just that's just a pure fact. Maybe you guys should start having babies. But you know what I mean? So
something else that can suppress the vote.
So isn't that in some sense what happens in the 60s? There's a demographic shift. There's a there are other things happen as well.
The shift culturally, for the South, economically. Right. The shift for the South, I think, from being Democratic to Republic can be stemmed from one basic thing, the Civil Rights Act.
Yes.
Basically. That basically said, you're going to lose the South for several generations, the Democrat, because it used to be a Dixiecrat. The South was very, very much Democratic because people held on to this notion of, Lincoln or whatever, or they were told they had to. And this is my thing. It's just like, again, it's just this political device that is used constantly. Racism is constantly used. Yes, you're poor. Yes, you're a poor white man you have nothing, but you're better than blacks. And that is enough.
Yeah.
That is enough. That is enough. And because
So
this is
that
exactly
the thing?
what
Is that the thing that keeps weaving its way through history? Is that
Yes,
that challenge?
Well, yeah, because I mean,
Okay,
let's stick with
the documentary.
Of
the documentary starts with Birth of a Nation, right? It has this thing, and this is the first time. What makes Birth of a Nation so it's a massive appeal, right?
Yep, first mass.
It's how
mass film.
First mass appeal. It attracts people. And what does it talk? It doesn't talk. It talks about the black man stealing your poor white woman. He's molesting her, and you gotta defend her honor. And who gets mad? I mean, like, who gets?
I mean, they even say, like, here we have this woman who would rather jump off a cliff than be raped by a black
right, exactly. We gotta save her, and don't let the animals get to her. So now they feel that there is a cause, there is something to be fighting for. So therefore, you don't forget the fact that, you know, like, all of us are here, poor blacks, ex-slaves, and whites of us. We are all fighting to get the plantation. Because the master, the man who owns the plantation, has everything. He owns everything. He controls everything. We need to free that up. But no, they're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about, I have to defend my honor. So again, whereas ordinarily he forgets that they have most things in common. So that happens. So then what they do, they start suppressing the vote.
Yeah.
Strength, you have power. That no matter how poor you are, it's something W. Du Bois says, that he says white people in the South would rather that psychological advantage over the economic one.
The real one. A real one.
So there was so many instances where they can be like, you know what, Mr. X-Slave,
Let's get together and overthrow all these motherfuckers.
Let's get this shit. And this isn't about being violent, right? This is about being because again,
being aware and even valuing the vote. Because if you remember in the Reconstruction era, which is I think something that people forget too, in the Reconstruction era, I think you had more black people in political office than you.
Yes, lovely drama
now.
girl just said that. She said in the Reconstruction period there was a surge in the number of black politicians, and then you have the KKK and Rosewood and the terror on Black Wall Street.
Isn't that weird? And isn't that weird that that what we're having now would coincide with a black president? Because I mean, that's what I think of it too. I think of Obama's rise as almost comparable to what was happening in the country politically post Reconstruction. There was so much hope. There was so much possibility for like a very small period of time. Maybe 5 years? Not even. And then what happens is a reign of terror.
Yeah, they find a way to just shut it down.
Terror.
And exactly what I'm saying. So racism is not a natural defense. It's an economic. It's a socioeconomic defense. So what you do, how you do it is just basically tell poor white people. Because look at Trump. What do Trump say all the time? Who do I have? The working class people. That's who he has. That's who he constantly I mean, some of this thing is just like, Mister, you're fucking reckless. You forgot how to say it's coded better. But though I think what the documentary kind of forces us to ask ourselves too, though, is that you can't simply blame the other because we too have internalized the ideas of ourselves. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that's probably, for me, to be honest, was sort of the most devastating part of it, is the sort of examination that you have to have about where your own ideas might be coming from, the things that you have taken in. And
that you don't even realize
that you don't even. Yeah, I mean, I feel like in some weird way
that's you too. They have to convince everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because can we go, if we move to, let's talk about where we were convinced, right? If we move along that line, let's talk about what's happening in the 60s and the 70s and the rise of the Black Panther Party, and also how actually quite popular the Black Panther Party was initially,
but also how small.
No, but I mean, just in terms of the support. Yeah. I mean, the money that was pouring in for the Black Panther movement, in many ways, that was white money. That was college-educated white money.
It was, but
that shift also, the shift that happens where we talk about how we're going to change the way people perceive the Black Panther, change the way people perceive folks in the 60s, change the way that look at the criminalizing of activism that happens in the 60s. These people are now chaotic. They're pushing back on peaceful citizens who want to get on with the business of life. Because prior to that period, I always assumed that, we always talked about white riots.
Yeah.
Well, but this
is where the language of everything started to change. This is where, in the language that still exists today, it was the beginning of that Nixon era where we stopped talking so much about black and white, and we started to criminalize the black man and the people of color, the minorities, all of that. And we started calling for law and order. This is where it comes from.
Because it was no longer
it didn't work. It didn't work anymore. You couldn't say
exactly.
Nigger. You couldn't do that.
But beyond that piece though, but think about it. You have to think about the cultural milieu, right? Because in the 60s, everything is in an upheaval. Everything is, right? You've got poor white kids fearful of Vietnam. All of these things are happening situationally that could have brought groups of people together.
And what do you tell them? What do you tell these people? Is that, hey, you have nothing to fear overseas. You have to fear at home, because a black man is gonna come into your home and kill you and take what you got.
And therefore,
most of these people have never seen black people before. They live in towns where there are no black people.
Yeah.
This is a trick. This is really the trick of how it works.
No, it was a trick. It was a trick. It was a trick that's later admitted. You have people talk about.
I think that's
what we did.
I think that's powerful, because I think that was always something people said and black people talked amongst themselves.
And the conspiracy that we knew it had to have been something organized.
True, right? Right.
It was
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. We had an advisor of Nixon.
Yeah. What did he say?
He came out. Yes. And he said, I'll read it to you, the whole thing. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies: the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing them both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And
it also does something.
I like the little
important.
section. Wait, I like the little section. Did you read the section where he says you start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger?
Yes. Yes.
By 1968,
he talks about
can't say nigger. That hurts you, backfires. So you say stuff like, forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this. But what I think is so interesting is that because this is the political environment that you have, where you do end up in some ways distinctly criminalizing rights, but in a very different way, right? Because you have this moment of potential collusion between blacks and whites. The country's chaotic, right? You've got college kids going crazy. They don't want to die in Vietnam for some pointless war. Right. And so there's a moment where there's a possibility that these two groups, not even just these two, many groups, because Native Americans were also a part of it. You can bring these groups of people together. But instead, what you end up doing is the continuing criminalization of the black group. But then also, you then infect any sort of left-leaning white person with that swath too. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Because what had happened in this time, right? Let us not forget that what had publicly been shown was that two Jewish white boys were killed along with a black civil rights freedom rider. They were killed together.
Yep.
And it was very clear that this was orchestrated, and it was very much come from up in the chain with the police. The Ku Klux Klan had infiltrated. That's how they want to put it. But I don't say the Ku Klux Klan infiltrated. I said they were just all. The Ku Klux Klan was a police officer, the sheriff. That it was all connected. It was all working together. And how do you how do you get people distracted? How do you distract people from their real problems? Because again, as I pointed out, all of these crime statistics, all of these things that they're talking about, oh my God, we need a war on drugs. It's not true.
Yeah.
There are no numbers to bear these things out.
No, there's not.
No one was, one thing a slave knew was not to go touch a white woman.
Yeah.
It's the one thing he knew more than anything else. She could be rubbing up on him and whatever it is to be run far, far away. Because you know what? When she get pregnant, sure as hell no, we gotta know that she ain't Master's, that baby ain't Master's baby. Okay? But it wasn't, so the white women, because here's a very interesting fact for you people. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, had Sally Hemings, and everybody knows that, whatever. But what you do not know is that Sally Hemings was his wife half-sister.
Yes.
Same father. So whereas he was banging his wife, had children, he was raping Sally Hemings, his wife half-sister. Now you know how that white woman was looking at Sally Hemings, her half-sister.
Well, she couldn't say nothing. Well, listen,
she couldn't say anything
because Sally Hemings is proof of her own father.
Right.
Her own father's culpability as well. So it's like a legacy of white men.
Let's back up a little bit and include our audience that's listening. Lovely drama girl.
Wait, lovely. Go ahead.
Lovely drama girl asked, did anybody see the PBS documentary on the Black Panthers? Yes. I have to admit that it's on my DVR. I never watched it. But she said one Panther said that they were successfully building links with the poor whites in Appalachia, and then the FBI stepped up surveillance and intelligence. You know, it was all about just shutting that connection down.
Exactly.
We can't let this happen. Because let's take a second and define what it means to be the majority. Because a lot of people think it's numbers, but the majority doesn't have anything to do with numbers. Majority is about who holds the power.
Exactly.
It's all about power, which is why, like Andreen just stated at the beginning of the podcast, how, the whites they're outnumbered now, but they still have the power. So
they got all the money, and all the institutional structures.
But just imagine. Here's the kicker. It isn't just about having the money and having international power, whatever the case may be. Every time you try to dismantle those situations, right, those institutions, what comes out and be said, right? We have affirmative action. Poor white people come out and be like, oh my God, you're disadvantaging us. We don't get a spot because a black person is taking our
everybody
spot.
Want to be Abby, right?
Nobody speaks about the fact that, Abby gets to say that her test scores are higher than every single person of color. Abby never checks her white friends, right? Abby never checks her white friends to find out if any of her white friends have lower scores than her, which I'm sure they do. Yeah, and they get it. Abby doesn't say, a white person took my spot. Abby
she never does. She always assumes.
She never does. She always, not only she assumes that, it is allowed to be said.
Yes.
That whenever Abby gets to constantly say that the person who took her spot, a spot that wasn't willed to her, that's the thing that gets me with Abby. Abby, girl, it ain't yours. It was never yours, okay? It was always a lottery for everyone. Abby gets to run away and say, it's always a person of color. And that is constantly what you keep doing to poor white people. You keep telling them all of their disadvantages in life, it's because of the black people of color, particularly the black people.
Well,
because they're the more visible.
Well, but I think what's interesting, I mean, I like what you're saying here, Emmanuel. I'm another person that's commented on our podcast, which is he makes a good point that gains made material and symbolic by black people for a sustained period of time twice before Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement results in backlash that seeks to limit the progress made. So essentially, this is actually the third wave. I guess it is. It is the third wave.
Yeah, it's constantly
building with Black Lives Matter and the focus on mass incarceration. Because any kind of perceptual advancement, which is why Realz, I think there's a part of me that resists this notion that that in some sense, whites don't participate in propagating this racist notion, right? Like it's not just simply a system that they're kind of helpless to fall in line. there is a part because of the Abby example. There is a part of it that suggests that people really believe that this country's theirs alone, right?
Well,
so all advancements, anything that happens anything that comes from us or from anyone else who's perceived as an outsider is necessarily something that has been taken from them. So how do you ground those ideas?
But this is what I'm saying. I wanted to pull up something here. One of my favorite writers is James Baldwin.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things he's ever written is The Fire Next Time. And one of the things he says to the nephew that there is one of the major fundamental problem with Americans is that, and I would particularly say white Americans, because there is no need for them to seek out any other truths, because their truth is that they do not understand their history. They really don't understand how the history that they've been told in high schools and in college is full of shit and it's propping up their head. They're not being, so they get this crazy sense of superiority. This is my country. I own it. It's very hilarious. And I think I was just watching the news today that in Chicago, a Vietnam vet, she's half Thai and half white.
Yeah. She
said, like, my family have been here since the beginning of the revolution. And he said, wait, from Thailand? And I was just like, this guy was like, he straight up said it to this woman.
But there's always been that idea, though. There's always this idea. And this is what's so interesting to me about like the Trump notion of make America great again. And when you listen to his supporters, it really comes down to this idea that there's no matter how far back you can trace your lineage as a person of color, it'll never make you legitimate.
Right.
There's never any legitimacy to any gain that you have made, because even with this woman, even though she can trace, because remember, she can trace her family's heritage all the way to the Revolutionary War.
She can,
but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because your legitimacy is built around this notion of whiteness that Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about, right? Is like whiteness is the default position. So even if you can trace everything and you can do all the work, there's never going to be a legitimate place for you. So all of these pieces criminalizing you, talking about all those things, it's all part of that essential original sin, which is that you do not belong here.
But notice this strategy every single time, right? But this is my point. I'm not saying that white people are helpless participants. They are the grease, right? They're keeping the engine going. Because there's no other. Because just imagine if a rich white man come into your face and be like, "Black people are full of shit. They're a bunch of niggers." Well, he alone standing there. What are you? Just gonna be, sir?
Donald Trump.
For your safety, please back away.
He says that to us every day.
Say it to us every day. However, but he said it from a microphone behind a lectern with his 15,000 supporters. He keeps saying, when the reporters keep saying, what 4,000 people here, right? We forget that this is a man who was paying crowds, right, to be there present for him. So, but you get these people to say this, and these people are putting up this energy, and then of course the media is implicit and contributing to this madness. But that's who he constantly gets. He is not going to get a bunch of middle-class rich people to be joining in his chorus behind it. They wouldn't say the same thing he says. He gets these people to say it because they feel like they have a stake. Interestingly, what we should go back to notice that the Confederate flag wasn't a thing until the 1950s.
Yeah. Well, isn't that everything? Like, isn't that every kind of...
But prior to that, people were ashamed of the Confederate flag because it was such because so many young people died for no goddamn reason.
Well, no, I never really understood that because I've always assumed that there was there's always been a romanticizing of the Southern soldier in my mind.
They had to tell themselves something, but they're
brothers, we're brothers. We lost our brothers, brother against brother. And I've always felt like the South has been allowed to believe that it had lost the war, but had won some sort of weird moral victory. And I think the North colluded in that. And I think in many ways...
Andrew Jackson. Look, I'm not trying to be on the Hamilton bandwagon here. I've never seen the show. And, but I just got to say, Hamilton should stay on the $10 bill for historical reasons. It's Andrew Jackson. Because one of the things that we haven't pointed to, I think it may have been mentioned in the documentary, But one of the major things that happened after the Civil War is that the federal troops pulled out. And then the Ku Klux Klan was allowed to run wild. That was part of the backroom deal. Because before that, the Ku Klux Klan was being kept in check, not because of any sort of it, because they were being like, you do some shit to these people, you're going to go to jail. You're going to have to face some kind of consequence. So with the Ku Klux Klan move, with the federal troops moving out, states then get their right, and then they get to police themselves. And it's always the same MO, right? Use criminality as the defining marker. And not just say they're criminals, because all over the world there are criminals, right?
Lots of criminals,
Criminals. But the trick in America is to make, and as we've seen it happen in South Africa too, is to not just say these people are criminals, they are animals, and their criminality cannot be helped. It is part of their DNA.
It's our DNA.
Inherently
It's embedded.
who they are.
This is who we are.
It's embedded who they are. So when they talk about economic advantages, when they talk about economic collaboration, fuck that shit, people, because they're animals. Do you cooperate with your dog? No, you do not. You don't.
Well, I mean, I do think
it is. Works.
It is, but
exactly how the trick works.
It is, and I think Emmanuel is right. I love that you've said that.
And
I
that's
love
how
that.
you push it.
I love that Emmanuel has said that.
Tell us what he said.
You have to.
No. I mean, I read it. I think
okay.
I love that. You might have missed that. I read the section where Emmanuel really talks about this notion of third wave of progress. And white privilege recognizes whiteness yields real material benefit, whether it's a white person, the proletariat, or the aristocrat. No, I mean, I think that's true. I think one of the things that I think is really, I think this is why I think this documentary is so powerful in this moment, right? Because if we can sort of take a look back at the lineage of these ideas, we can see where we are possibly in this moment, right? Absolutely. We can see what's happening. We can see that this was necessarily going to be the case after the election of a black man, right, to the highest office of the land. Because what I think was so interesting is they are willing to lower the office and bastardize the office with a Donald Trumper.
Forget before Donald Trump came into being. Let's look at what happened in the Congress, right? They did nothing. They literally sat on their arm, and the American people said the people that they voted in, they're getting paid, and they did nothing. Everyone is talking about repeal Obamacare. But I was there when it was happening, watching all of this nonsense. I remember I went to Washington, D.C., and I saw an old white woman. She was walking with a cane. Her husband had Parkinson. She's from Tennessee. And I'm like, Granny, what the fuck are you doing here in D.C. in this crowd? Girl, you need to be home, sitting in a walker to be taken care of. She's like, take your hands off my health care. And I'm like, health care. You need health care.
But I mean, listen, what I think is so, it's amazing how they've sold them a bill of goods. Like, honey, you do know that you are getting government aid, right? That's Medicare. Like, you do, because
people they think it's like their inherent right, but they don't want to acknowledge that it's a government.
You don't understand, but you see, there is this. My mother would say, like, "Do you?"
You're breaking up.
But that was again so. Oh, I'm breaking up?
You are bad, so I'm cutting you off. So let's backtrack.
So we can go back
forward at the same time.
We can go back into the movie world. We're in the 70s.
We had Nixon. We had the Nixon era, and we had the law and order, and we had this. Nixon was the first person to introduce the whole theory of war on drugs. Even though there wasn't a big drug abuse problem, but the people in power knew that they could peg this on somebody, being the black people, and make it a big deal. But there wasn't a problem. There was not a problem. So that bleeds us over into the Reagan era. And I am sure, I remember when I was little, I remember watching.
Say no to drugs.
Say no, just say no. I remember Nancy Reagan on TV going, just say no. I remember the cracking of the egg in the hot cast iron pan. This is your brain. This is drugs.
Don't get me started on Nancy. Don't get me started on Nancy.
Listen, it was at the time, it was profound, and it obviously had effect because here I am. I mean, I was a little girl. I still remember that. I remember, honest to God, true story, cooking an egg by myself, eating up the pan, going, this is your brain.
Well, listen, we didn't say it wasn't. We didn't say it wasn't going to be. We didn't say it wasn't. But listen, she just put the fear of God in you. That's what she did.
But you know what's interesting, right?
No, wait, what she did is she got other people to buy into it, including Black people.
Well, yeah,
who have now said, God, I didn't realize what was going on. But that was this huge start of a transition period. The evolution of slavery was now moving away from this black and white talk. The very plain language talk had moved from the nigger talk and, we don't want them here, to the law and order, to now drugs. And what happened? We have the introduction of crack cocaine.
But I think it's even beyond. I mean, but think about it though. What I think is interesting is that every single time there's something happening, it's happening in every community. The parallel is happening, but it's how you judge it. Because
hold on. Wait 1 second. Because I did go back and look this up, and they did talk about it in the documentary a bit. The truth of the matter being, at this time, there wasn't a drug issue.
There was a drug. Well, sure, but
it wasn't as big as everybody was saying that it was. It wasn't.
Actually, I think no, hold on. I think something needs to.
No, one thing that the documentary did not touch on at all, and I encourage people to go and research this on their own. We can't cover every single thing here, but there was a huge thing that happened when this whole war on drugs phenomenon, we can call it, started. Where, it's no secret that we had cocaine and we had crack, which are essentially the same thing, right? And
first of all, Whitney said crack is whack, and the real deal is that.
But it all comes.
Wait, Janina, let him finish his point. What are you saying?
I was about to say that the real difference between crack and cocaine, though chemically, is crack is the derivative of cocaine. The real true difference is that it's the cost.
Yes,
cocaine is far more expensive than crack.
But it got to where
therefore it would be used. It is supposedly being used by more Black people. But the interesting thing is that constantly, no matter how many times you do the statistic, it's constant drug use is not prevalent between one race of people, whatever the case may be.
Over another.
It is common between.
It absolutely wasn't.
Everybody.
But there is a lot of stuff out there that supports the theory, we can call it, that the government pushed crack into Black neighborhoods. There's a lot out there. You can do with whatever you want.
But you don't even need to go down that road. What we're saying is that
you need to go down that road because cocaine was
drug use was happening that's what we're saying. Drugs was happening in both communities. It's how you treated it that made it different.
So yes, exactly. That's my point. So at this point, we have cocaine, the sophisticated drug, in the white communities, and crack cocaine in the Black communities. And that's where we get the start of all of this. This is worse, in this push that this drug is worse, and we are going to punish these people in a harsher way. And then you had Clinton come around, and Bill, I guess we have to differentiate between the two now, who, come around, and all these laws come that, the 3 strikes you're out, and, mandatory sentencing, and all of this stuff happened. But there was a push, it seems, from the government to get this specific drug in specific communities, and we were going to punish these people in a harsher way. We can't ignore that.
Hold on. I'm going to say, I think we're sort of like leaving out a little bit here. One, I would put this out there before people run away. There is no proof that crack cocaine was distributed in black communities like wholesale by the government. There are other things that we can look at. I think something that needs to be stressed.
Oh, there's some stuff out there. There's some stuff out there that supports that, and it's
you have to think of. You have to look at this thing as sort of like from a politician point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
The politicians who are doing this. It's what can you do to show some strength of power, right?
Yep.
Think of it like you're in the schoolyard. Who do you want to beat up? You're not gonna go beat up a little girl. You're gonna go beat up with a big guy, right? So what can be the most demonstrative power? Putting people in jail, that shows your toughness, right? And it's not, and again, racism doesn't go away per se. So people have these sentiments and these notions are floating around about stereotypes of black people, people of color, et cetera, et cetera. Black people are pushing up in the 1960s because not only did the civil rights happen in the Civil Rights Act, black people were making gains in the 1970s, right? Because jobs were opening up. They could then go get applied to the same jobs now. So institutions were sort of like dismantling. They could go into stores and shop and whatever the case may be. It was now passed to be openly racist to people of color. But then the economy crashed in the 1980s and 70s into the 80s. And what do you need to show? Because what happened, the toughness on crime.
You have to show strength in some way.
You have to show strength. The toughness on crime, just in what happened is that the federal government started to pump in more money. And what they begin to slowly do is to eat away states' rights. So before, policing was a state thing, right? A city thing, a city ordinance. The federal government couldn't swoop in and do whatever they want to do. Hence why they got rid of the federal troops in the late 1800s. So now the federal government is offering you lots of money. And what do these people need? Money. You can hire more police officers. And you got to be doing something with yourself. You can't be Andy Griffith. You can't be Andy Griffith. So what do you start to do?
Criminalize
You start
behavior.
going around and criminalize behavior.
No,
and remember,
I'm going to stop you for a second.
Because the notion is coming from the top, right? This is what the top is saying, right? And it's only being said as a political strategy.
Yeah.
Which is clearly what that Nixon guy man said.
Yep.
He didn't say this like black people are animals and whatever. Because this was a political strategy. We wanted these black people to quiet down. We wanted these hippies to quiet down. So what do? We criminalize them because in America, being a criminal, being in handcuffs, unless you're a politician, is one of the worst things ever. It's really horrible. And what we can do to you as a criminal, as this documentary is showing you, we can not only make you a slave, we can take away every single inalienable right that you have.
All the rights that you gained. Yes, you can't vote.
Exactly. You can't vote in some places. You can't get property. You can't get a job.
Nope.
So you can't feed yourself because literally, if one of the things that is against the law, right? Let's say, Andreen, you're an artist and you paint all the time, and I steal your paintbrush. I do not go to jail not just for stealing your paintbrush. I am in trouble because I am stopping you from doing your craft and making your money. But what do we do for prisoners? You can't get a job.
Yeah.
We stop you from having a livelihood, and this is okay.
But Janina, what's your thing?
What I'm saying is, and again, I encourage you to go and look it up and read about it as I did. There is evidence out there that suggests that there was this huge operation between the CIA and Nicaragua drug lords that brought crack cocaine into the black neighborhoods. And there's so much. There's so much. And it all turned into the Iran-Contra controversy. It all stemmed from government bullshit and this conspiracy to make our people look bad. They took this stuff to specific places. It's all out there. I mean, I haven't had the time to research it as thoroughly.
What's the point you want to make?
I'm saying that we have to acknowledge that there's information out there because that states that the government put this drug into these neighborhoods, and we are going to make this punishment harsher for this drug, because that's exactly what happened. It started way before what we think of as people being criminalized harsher for crack than they are cocaine. It started way before that. There was a movement to get this drug into specific neighborhoods, and it was
But I mean, we get that, but the idea is that it doesn't really matter what the name of the drug is; it's who's doing it.
Exactly.
You know, because I mean, it's because I mean, at
the
the end of the day,
that's what I'm saying. The government was doing it.
I know, but what I'm saying is, it's not so much about whether Black people were doing heroin or we were going to do coke, or it's about who's doing it. Then you can criminalize the behavior, because what we know now is that we have a high degree of drug use in white communities, and now the emphasis is on a public health issue. I think one of the things that I think has been really, so it's like, you know, I mean, if you talk about poor whites and Appalachian and you know, cities and neighborhoods that are ravaged by drugs, but now suddenly the emphasis is no longer on let's criminalize this behavior. Now the emphasis is, you know what, public health. And I think one of the things that I think is kind of fascinating about this, and we kind of skipped over Bill and Hillary, but I don't know, you know, one of the things I've always wondered is why the Republicans hated Bill and Hillary so much. Like, it's more rage than is even like understandable, right? And I think one of the things I think has been, I kind of left the documentary thinking and realizing that the reason why they're so pissed off is because Bill and Hillary stole their strategy.
They beat them at their own game.
You know what I mean? Like, I think
that's exactly what happened.
I really feel like I was like, oh, like, because I never understood it. Because, you know, let's be honest. At a certain level, they're all, I mean, listen, I get it. Hillary and Trump are very different. They're gonna execute different policies. Well, listen, these people hang out. They go to dinner. They're all part of the same social sphere. But the rage has been like incomprehensible to me. And so I was like, oh, it's because it's because they brought the left to the center.
Yep.
Leaving them
underestimated Bill Clinton.
And they underestimated Bill Clinton's willingness to throw everything out there for political gain.
And also, he did
criminalize Black people, to do all the things that you would accuse a Republican of doing. Remember, welfare reform came under Bill Clinton. All of the policies that are supposedly were supposed to be inherently problematic for people of color were executed by Bill Clinton, and yet we embrace them as our quote-unquote first Black president.
Exactly.
I mean,
that's what really gets Republicans. Is that he can be Republican?
He did it, and they made for it.
Game.
The Black people.
They beat them at their own game. That's what happened.
But not only did they do that, Janina, they beat them at their own game, but they also got love from us for doing it.
And they elevated everything.
Yeah,
yes.
when Republicans do it, we hate them. But when Democrats do it, we're all compassion. You know what I mean? So it's like, and so then they can never rip the folks of color from the Democratic Party. I mean, I think eventually they will, though. Let's be honest. 20, 30 years, y'all. We're going to...
I mean, Janina, to your point about the crack conspiracy, I would tell you this, though.
It's not a conspiracy. It's true, real. Just kidding.
I can't speak honestly about the crack theory in that manner. But here are the things that I can speak openly and honestly, and I know it's fact, that one, police do sprinkle drugs on criminals and innocent people.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Police do plant drugs on people. Two, I don't know if the federal government was necessarily involved in putting crack into Black neighborhoods. What I would say, I know the federal government is definitely responsible for criminalization and the heavy punishment for these drug offenders, because at no point, one of the interesting things about the war on drugs, it has never been a war to rehabilitate.
Nope.
For particular, that's the difference between Black and white. The programs out there is for white people, but people of color would go to jail. Yeah. So, and that is where I would say this is one of the interesting things that the federal government is definitely, they're involved in that. So they handed out money, and when I say they handed out money, they handed out billions of dollars two organizations. This is one of this interesting thing that they broke the news.
Yeah, that now need to defend themselves, right?
The
They're
new
like, we
Jim
need to
Crow.
defend our
Listen to this. Listen to this rather interesting statistic, right? More money was being handed out for the war on drugs than actually serious crimes.
Yeah.
So there was more money being devoted for drugs than on murders and rapes. That's why rape.
Well, because we had this transition of what we were calling slavery.
But I mean, I think what's interesting too about this is how it changes and shifts, right? Because if you think about the money and the resources that are available to police departments now, which is when we talk about sort of the militarization of the police, right? So if you're going to militarize the police, what necessarily has to happen? They have to have a war that they're fighting, right? And it has to be on American soil. It's not foreign soil. So you've got sort of like the souped up, fully.
The first thing you do, sorry.
Yeah, no, you've got like a souped up police force. What are they going to do? They've got tanks. Where are they going to use tanks? How are they going to use
Exactly. The first thing that you do is that, because something you need to watch is how, again, birth of the nation. What we need to also watch is just the cowboys and westerns in America.
Oh, God, yeah.
Westerns have fake history. As I was watching westerns growing up, I was like, I don't understand what's happening here. I don't see people of color here. When the fuck is this happening? At what time in the world is this happening? I don't understand it.
Well, you know, the Wild West is a mythical invention. It never
exactly. It's a mythical invention invented by Italians. Italians. Spaghetti Western? Spaghetti Western. Music composed by Italians. It's not a real thing. It's not a real thing. Again, this is what I'm saying. These ideas and these heroes and whatever are pulled out of bullshit, pulled out of the air. Yeah. And they just couple together and give this notion of manhood and white superiority. And it's mostly affecting the poor whites. That's who run around with this idea, because they need something to believe in. So the first thing you do, G.I. Joe, all these things are big action figure. So you start giving these police officers some toys. And what boys love more than toys?
They need to work with it.
The first thing the federal government did was open up this huge cache of military weapons that they had laying all over the place, old weapons. I mean, imagine a small town had a fucking tank. A town like 1,000 had a tank.
And you got
everybody now had a SWAT team. Yep. And you know what SWAT teams do, right? SWAT team wasn't for hostages. SWAT team was going to execute no-knock warrants.
Yeah.
For drugs.
Yeah. And who brought all of this to us? Let's keep it real. It was Clinton. It was Clinton who gave all of these police departments more police.
Well, I mean, I think
before them all the money.
No. Wait, hold up. I'm not on the Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton bandwagon. But God knows I gotta vote for her. I'm trying to say no shit.
I'm not on it. But you have to be honest about what happened.
Let me be fair.
No. Wait. You know what? I'll tell you about this after we get through this. But I had a third alternative for voting. But anyway, I'll get back to that later.
Hold on. This started up. This isn't Bill Clinton finished the job.
He finished the job that it started.
He took it to a whole new fucking level, is what he did.
He
finished it. He finished
the job, because I'm telling you, Reagan came up with this idea of a welfare.
Yeah.
It started with Reagan. Reagan brought out this, and she was the welfare queen. That was all Reagan. Reaganomics. Nancy Reagan with stranger danger said no to drugs.
But you know what they did was they created a world that was a fearful world.
Yes.
A world where Americans were always afraid, looking over their shoulder at the boogeyman, and then Willie Horton enters into the midst of that.
That started with Bush #1. Dukakis was winning. It looked like he was going to be our next president. Exactly. And then Bush says, "What's going on?" Well, you know what? I'm going to make them all scared with this scary black man. And you know what? He was an awful man. This Willie Horton was an awful man. But Bush
used everybody else, you know what I mean?
He used his face to put the fear of a black man coming in and raping and
Which is
stabbing
an old
everyone.
fear, a very old fear
And
built
he says,
into their
I'm going to be
DNA.
tough on crime and blah, blah, blah. But listen. Our listeners are ready for us to move on to Alec. So let's go there.
Oh, Alec. I have to say, Alec was probably the most startling aspect of it. Like everything else that had been introduced in the documentary to date, you can sort of extrapolate from everything that you knew, kind of, right? It's like what she did was she organized it. Ava organized it in such a thoughtful and methodical way that you can get there. But all of those ideas were sort of there, hidden, known, and then pulled together and made into a fabulous yarn, right?
Yes.
But now you get Alec, and I'm like, whoa, what is this, Alec?
Alec is.
But this goes back to my original theory, right? So continue. Go ahead, Janina.
You're killing me.
Wait. First, Realz, can you tell us your original theory fast?
No. What I was saying, it goes back to what I said earlier, that that in my mind, racism is constantly being linked to an socioeconomic situation, and it's always being used for profit. Imagine
in the service.
Yes.
It's in the service
and
and the profit.
Here we have it, right?
Okay,
laid out all in front of us. And
tell us, Alec.
About Alec.
Janina.
Alec is an acronym for American Legislative Exchange Council. Now, there was a part in the documentary where it actually said, you probably thought this was a person. You know what? I am there. I have heard of Alec. I had heard of Alec. I remember politicians talking about. First, let me say, I have followed politics heavily for many, many, many years. So maybe some of the things that I'm familiar with hearing, the average person wouldn't be familiar with, but I was in that group of people who had no idea what it actually meant. I honestly thought that it was someone's name, like they said in the documentary.
Sure.
I had no idea what it was. And it is this group of it's a lobbying group of politicians and corporations, and they fucking write bills for the politicians, hand them over, and the politicians get them passed. And it benefits the corporations, and it doesn't benefit the people, any people, especially the incarcerated people, because that's who it seems to affect the most. But for me, that was the scariest part of this film. I just had no idea this was happening.
Why was it scary for you?
Because, first of all, we don't really know who Alec is. Okay, so it's this group of people, but who are they?
They evolve. They're like the Council on Foreign Relations. They're like secret think tanks that evolve.
So it's this ever-changing body of people who think that they know what's best, and I'm always really careful about watching stuff like this, about where the information comes from. And I took some time and I went back and I researched the people in the documentary, and everybody's pretty legit. It doesn't seem like a piece of propaganda. And the guy
why would it be? Why would it be propaganda? The thing about Alec that's interesting is that it makes sense because we have lobbyists.
Let me answer that.
Right?
We do have lobbyists, but let me answer that question, because probably other people had it too. Why would you think it's a piece of propaganda? Because look, when it came out, it's an election time, because we've had other things come out around now. We've had, Hillary's America and things like that are huge pieces of propaganda. But if you don't know any better and you watch it, you take everything to be truth. So you have to be diligent with your own mind and open enough to say this might be a piece of propaganda. And you have to go and look and find out where the information is coming from. Who are these people that are speaking that we are listening to, and decide for yourself whether or not this is legit. So my conclusion was this was all legit as a whole. The Alec guy,
but it doesn't seem like. I mean, I'm not.
It's the timing.
I'm surprised that people would think it's not legit. That's how our system works. Politicians don't have time to research every single thing that they're going to put forth in a bill. It's impossible for myself.
Let's be 100 here. We've seen most of these politicians having a conversation. They're not that smart. They're clearly
No,
not.
but why? But the thing that's interesting to me is why. First of all, this is how lobbying works, right? So it's built into our system, at least now. So the existence of ALEC, I think it's only. I think what surprised me, not so much about the existence of ALEC, but in some sense that they made so many errors in making you know about ALEC. This seems to me like it would be a secret group, which it was previously. It's not something everybody talks about.
Right.
But it's definitely something that both sides know about, right? Because both sides negotiate with, it's not something that's, I mean, yes, it's entirely, in the documentary, it made it seem like it was entirely Republican. And I'm sure in this endeavor it was. But I can imagine that similar things exist for Democrats as well.
Sure, we just don't know what it's called.
We don't know what it's called. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm sure fans will be able to tell us soon enough.
But, right? Because this is why you have these industries that are able to push through all kinds of things through Congress that's going to be beneficial to one industry over another. And in some ways, that's what they're competing for at the table. We're sort of...
So poor white people get it
scraps
together.
Well, but let's really talk about what ALEC has been able to accomplish.
Stand your ground.
Because it's scary. It's fucking scary. There's no other way to say it. Yes, stand your ground. So what is stand your ground? Stand your ground is a law in Florida that says you can shoot somebody if you feel threatened. Who proposed that legislation? ALEC. I mean, it's crazy.
Put together by gun lobbyists and Walmart, no?
You see, one of the
things
the
NRA. Specifically the NRA.
But I have to say that it makes sense, though, right? It makes sense. And the question for me now is, what is the functioning ALEC that we don't know about? What are the structures that they are putting in place? Because that's the thing that I think comes out in the documentary about vigilance that you talk about, Janina, is that we always have to be vigilant about how the system maintains itself. Right. How it shifts and takes different forms, because ALEC disbanded because now we all know about ALEC. But those people haven't disappeared. They've simply gone to some other arena where they are able to sit at the table with Congress people and get whatever they want.
They have a different look and say they're doing something different, which is what we saw clearly what they're doing there. But some things I think that we sort of like but you're right. We can't cover everything, but the sort of interesting thing is that much of why the war on drug has been successful is that the judicial system has allowed it to work.
Sure.
Not only from the prosecutor's point of view, which Michelle Alexander calls the most powerful person in the judicial system is the DA.
Yeah.
But also from the judicial point of view, in which that constantly they've been able to lapse. I just reconfigure the Bill of Rights. Like, police just can't roll up on you and be like, hey, what you doing, whatever the case may be. They have allowed the police to basically operate where they can actually seize you as a person. Not even by physical, but just standing and blocking you and you can't move. And taking over your space. And that's one of the major tenets of has been able to go. Because by and large, and here are the facts. And the numbers, again, the war on drugs is mainly like the effectiveness of the war on drugs has been rather poor. Mm-hmm. That much of the stop, over 90%, they get nothing. They just imagine that. Just imagine you failing at your job.
It's not really a war. It's not really a war, is it? It's not a winning war. It's not a war meant to be won.
But exactly. It's not a war meant to be won.
Right.
It's a war meant to keep people divided, keep people in check, keep matter in control, and that the few people, the oligarchs, continue to make money. More because it is profit. Racism has been profitable.
But let's talk about yes, it has been profitable. And what has ALEC done to contribute to that? And that has been closely aligned with the privatization of the prisons of this country. And what does that really mean? I mean, it's insane. You know,
well, but think about the general trend. This is think about how insidious this is. Let's pull back a little bit from Alec, and then let's ask the question about how we've been asked to be suspicious of any initiative that's generated from the government, right? So we now have this dialogue or this thing that happens in this country where we're supposed to believe that the government is wrong, right? Everything the government does is wrong. Everything that can possibly happen with the government is going to be poorly done, which is this sentence, which really sets us up for the privatization of anything and everything. Mm-hmm. So if you've got something like Alec that's pushing the privatization of, say, the criminal justice system or prisons, think about the privatization of other spaces, healthcare, of, you know, education, mind you, charter schools.
Yeah.
You know, so you really then begin to see that this selling efficiency, selling a better brand, selling a better way of doing business, that model, that underlying idea that we keep selling, it really sets us up for something like Alec to emerge as a value. Because we citizens buy into the idea that government run things are bad.
But there are so many things that Alec has their hands in that we don't even realize. I mean, let's talk about that for a minute.
But you have to understand, Alec is allowed to, Janina, Andreen pointed out, Alec is allowed to exist, and he will continue to, and things like Alec will continue to exist because of the amount of money that there is to be made.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Let's talk about the money.
So when groups are sitting around and notice that the federal government is pouring billions of dollars into this war on drugs, which any reasonable person and smart person gonna be like, this ain't no war, this is bullshit. How about I go in and make some money in here and whatever the case may be. And plus, it is need to be there because, you know, once the government creates a problem, they never want to deal with it. They try to pay someone else to deal with it. So the government start this war on drug, which largely can just take up people of color and put them in jail. And then the jails are exploding. So what do? You create jobs and create private prisons. Do you know how much these prison officers make? Like $10 an hour.
They don't make shit.
10 fucking
but you know,
private prison.
But think about but Janina, I mean,
it's so much bigger than that.
It is, but what I think is interesting is how now Alec is moving. Privatization of prison didn't work. So
well,
that's
what I want to talk about.
Let's do the other thing.
Yeah,
now prison reform. Prison reform.
Let's talk about what they did in prisons. Let's actually talk about that. So Alec proposed legislation that gets these companies in there that monopolize the things that happen in prisons, right? So you've got one company that has control over a huge percentage of the collect calls made home. That's okay. Awesome. So one of the examples given in the documentary was that a person in Maryland making a collect call from prison, because of legislation that was proposed and passed by Alec for this specific company, a person in Maryland making minimum wage, okay, for a 10-minute phone call. 10 minutes. They got to work an hour and a half to be able to afford that phone call. You've got Alec proposing legislation for food companies that provide all the food for our prisons. Yet we have all of these reports that there are maggots in the food, but there's, you know, all this money to be made because they are putting the food on the table for the prisoners. But the prisons are now private, therefore people only profit if the prisons are full. Therefore, we have to keep putting people in prison. It's this huge trickle-down prison effect.
It's like a Ponzi scheme.
And it's ugly. I mean, it is ugly. It is so ugly. But like you were just saying, so now people are noticing this mass incarceration thing, and they're saying, we got to do something about this. This is ridiculous. So now Alec is proposing legislation to move away from that. And they're talking about, you know, let's let these people stay in their communities, but let's monitor them with GPS bracelets. Well, guess what? There's this huge company that's going to, you know, buy into all of this and provide all the bracelets. So here we have more money again. So yeah, we're not going to enslave people in these little boxes. We're going to enslave them in their own homes. I mean, this is what I was talking about when I said this is how slavery has evolved. This is exactly what's happening. We're seeing it. But one of the biggest eye-opening things for me in this documentary was, are we going to be powerful enough as a people to step up and do something about it? Or are we going to sit back and watch like we have watched forever? Because you see these things happening, but no one has been able to stop it. So is it time to step up and say, we are not going to allow this to happen? Are we going to use our power as a people? I thought one of the things that I loved was Van Jones talking about the Black Lives Movement. And he was saying, you can't Google it. You can't find an address. You can't find a phone number. There is no one person that is responsible for it, because it's such a big and collective group. And it truly is a movement this time. Whereas, when you had the leader of the Black Panthers, then you have the government coming in and shooting and killing this man sleeping in his bed next to his pregnant wife. You can't do that with the leaders of this, because they don't exist in a sense, because it's so big and there are so many leaders that opportunity has been taken away.
After them one by one. Somebody's being charged for lynching. But you see, again,
but it's changing, and that's what I'm saying.
It's changing, but it goes back to, again, when you say the idea of slavery, it's this constant reshaping and reshifting in American history, where you keep using people of color, particularly Black bodies, to be making money off of their bodies.
Yes.
And this money isn't being profiting that community.
No, it's not.
Black people are being used and worked and made to labor.
I mean, I had somebody reach out to me a while ago on Twitter who wasn't from the States, asking about voting and what's the big deal about having to have IDs, proper IDs for voting. That, in their country, they have to have an ID for voting. And, I explained that it's not so much that you have to have an ID, it's that you have to have a federal issue ID. And the problem with that is yes, that's the law in most places, but it's only enforced in certain areas, and it's enforced in the areas where the people can't afford to get a federal ID, or they don't have the means to even get to a place that will issue them an ID. And, ALEC has proposed legislation that has passed that backs this up. Backs up this ID, having the quote unquote special IDs for voting. And I mean, it's fucking everywhere. And that scared the shit out of me. I mean, it scared me. I, as a mother, am thinking, holy shit, what do I do? And I know that I'm not the only one that thought this, because I have talked to other people about it. It is downright scary that you have this group of people who are coming together, handing over proposed laws to the people that run this country, and they get it passed because it benefits a certain group. It is scary, because I feel like, what do you do? What do you do to stop something this big? Because the truth is, the majority of the people don't even know what's happening. I mean, they're so fucking sloppy that they can hand over legislation on the fucking floor of the House with ALEC letterhead, and it doesn't even matter that it happened. That wasn't even enough. They're like, oh, are you, basically in cahoots with ALEC? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you bringing that up now? Well, because the logo's on, the paper that you passed out. And that's not enough?
It wasn't a big deal because the whole system operates.
Everybody knew how it worked.
Yeah,
right?
Like it's not Democrats and Republicans
in terms of
it operates that way.
The average Joe doesn't know that this exists.
But
that's what's scary.
But listen, at the end of the day, I mean, I think the only solution to this is a constant evaluation and a constant education and a constant sort of vigilance on your part to understand your system. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, and not being sort of like confused by the bigger picture. You know, like I think the small details. It's like, listen, you need to arm yourself as a voter. You need to understand what's going on. Because to be honest, I read, you know, this is an aside, but I think it's related. One of the things I was reading about was, you know, it's gerrymandering, but I guess it's gerrymandering, but, you know, but yeah, right. So, but, you know, in gerrymandering, one of the things that you read that book, you read a book about that and it feels hopeless. But one of the things that one of the reasons why it's hopeless is because people don't actually vote.
Well,
right?
you know,
you kind of have to overwhelm the system. At this point in time, they haven't.
Tell people what gerrymandering is.
Gerrymandering is how you cut districts up purposefully so that you can create majorities in communities where where it's not real. So, for example, one of the things that that is, I think it started with who introduced it? The K guy. What's his name? It was introduced pre-Obama, and this notion is it's when you read this, you can cut up districts. And how to cut up.
No,
hold on. Who was the guy? What was his name?
Ken Starr?
No, it's not Ken Starr. He talked about that this was going to be the Republican response to the fact that they don't have enough numbers. So when
Obama was elected, yes.
When Obama was elected, yeah.
It wasn't new then.
It wasn't new. It was always happening.
Hold up. This is a playbook straight from the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, but what you can do is what you do is you cut up districts in such a way so that you can get a majority, but what you end up having is a majority of people vote. So that's why I think in some ways it had to have happened in Ferguson, right? Like it had to have happened in Ferguson because Ferguson is overwhelmingly Black, but most of the people in the leadership position and most of the people who voted are white. So if you cut up a district, even though you have a district say of 150 people and 100 people in that district are Black and 50 are white, if you only get the 50 white people to vote, then that's exactly what you're going to have. And so what you can do is you can take a look at registration rolls, and you can see how many people are registered in various communities, and you can cut the district up in such a way that you force certain groups of people together and force a majority of votes.
But what people don't understand,
but only for voting, yes.
Only for voting.
Only for voting.
But if every registered voter went out and actually vote,
it would
harder
blow
to
do that.
Whole thing out of the water. It wouldn't work. It would not
harder
work.
to do that. It's harder.
Hold up. The Republican Party would tell you that that's voter fraud, right? Everybody who registered to vote can't vote.
No.
Everybody who was alive.
The Republican Party was the last party to redraw these lines because whoever controls the House and the Senate.
Oh, that was Karl Rove's strategy.
They are the ones that get to draw the lines. So when Obama won in 2008, Karl Rove said, all right, chill out, folks. Our big battle is 2010 when we have to revote for the House and the Senate. So we need to take control of that so that we can draw the district lines. And you know what? They fucking did it.
And I'm going to show you, I'm going to share this link with a perfect representation of how visually, how you can change a district made up of 50 people.
It's wild.
Control who wins. I'm going to share it on our podcast right here. This is the visual representation. And I'm also going to share it on Twitter.
Can we just back up to Alec for a second? Because I want to share some things that was just like crazy to me.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah, that's
because we don't. I mean, you know, we
can't cover everything. But
we can't cover everything. However,
well, we thought we could, but apparently we got checked.
No, we can't. But I mean,
you know. Who is involved?
We're going to be so Oprah about this topic. Oh,
that's fine.
No, but I mean, it's, you know, you can't cover everything.
Well, let's talk about though. Okay, so in the documentary, the big thing about Alec was who was making money off of prison labor, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of companies have backed away since they've been exposed, you know? Verizon, Whole Foods, McDonald's, Victoria's Secrets, Walmart, BP. I mean, the list is gigundous. And when you find out like what they were actually paying people for what they were doing, you know what really was wild? Like Victoria's Secret, since they have been exposed, has backed away from it all. But what they were actually doing was so their panties or, you know, whatever, their lingerie is getting shipped in. It's got this made in Honduras tag on it. And the prisoners are taking those off and replacing them with made in the USA tags. I'm like, are you kidding me? But you know what's crazy? People think this is what, I don't know if either of you watch Orange is the New Black.
No.
But in one of the recent seasons, maybe like season 4, I think it was, there's always like a central theme to the season. And in one of the seasons was prison panties. And I thought, when I read this, I'm like, is this where this came from? Because we see a lot of things on TV and drama, whatever. You know, they don't come out of somebody's ass. They're coming from somewhere. They're based in some kind of truth, no matter how distant the thread may be. It comes from somewhere. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my God, wow. You know, because here in the show, these women are being forced to make these panties and they're doing them for free. It's free prison labor. And they're like, well, how can we profit on it? So, you know, they find their own spin on it, whatever. And they do what they're going to do. But as I'm learning about this, I'm like, oh, well, somebody working on that show knew something, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, like when they were talking about McDonald's and I looked into that, you know, you've got these prison workers who are making the uniforms, they're making the utensils that are served at McDonald's and all of this stuff. And it's just so ugly because they're paying these people nothing. Like, seriously, who's working for 60 cents a day? There is a farm. There's a prison not too far from where I live, a maximum security prison. I can be there in probably 15, 20 minutes. There's a farm there. And I've never thought anything other than calling it the prison farm. I didn't think anything of it. But the truth is... You
thought they were making food for themselves. You know, they were having
healthy what I didn't? Snack. I didn't think they were really making food for themselves. I don't know what I thought. I honestly didn't think anything of it. I really didn't. I didn't know what the fuck they were doing with it. But then researching this documentary and finding out what happens, like, yeah, they're raising cattle and the fucking livestock's going in your Wendy's patties, people. You know, I mean, like, you don't even realize how much you are supporting this totally convoluted, fucked up system. And it's really hard to get away from.
Well, that's why we now have a prison strike that's happening that you don't see on the news.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, because we're not getting any coverage. Because
it's not getting any coverage. It's been, I think they've been on strike since September.
Mm-hmm.
The prison, it's like it's multiple prisons, right?
And
I think it started in Alabama, but this is like a large scale prison strike.
California for sure. California. But listen up, people. This is how I tell you they're gonna get you, right?
Who's gonna get you?
So these prisoners are working for 60 cents a day.
Yeah.
It's not the immigrants who's taking your jobs, people. It's the prisoners.
But it's not even that prisoners are taking, because that suggests that
prisoners are being forced
actively. They're forced to take it.
Exactly.
So these people are look at them. They're processing greens. You know, your salad that you get at your store, that was done by prison labor. You know?
And you want to call them animals?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here they could poison you.
It's a national strike. It's a national strike.
Yeah,
it started in September 9th.
Going to jail for non-violent offense, okay? And meanwhile, you get 30 days in jail for raping somebody.
Well, let's stay on target here. So they say the prisoners in the 29 prisons in 12 states, and more than 24,000 prisoners have missed work. This is what's happening. So you can see it in practice. You can see this in practice. So I think it's interesting. I mean, I think what's interesting about this, though, is that you understand that there's like a connection to what you can do, right? This impacts our lives. This impacts the things that we do, because we buy these things. We buy products. These folks are coming. Do you know what I mean? These are not
Did you read the lovely drama girl comment?
It doesn't. That doesn't. No. What was the comment? I've just read a few. Is there something?
She says, I remember
new?
a group of me and my friends boycotted certain brands that were using prison labor in the 90s, and we thought we were woke back then.
Well, you know what? Listen, don't we all think we're woke on some level? But you know what? I mean, I think that's the thing. You can't. The idea of it is that it's so insidious. Shape, and you have to be so vigilant at all times about these systems that are always going to try to exploit labor, exploit ideologies for a certain end. I mean, the fact that we now have a prison strike that's going on, obviously major companies who are contributing to both campaigns, major companies have decided that this is the way that they want to move forward. They're not interested in giving jobs to American workers. We've been sitting around talking about how jobs are outsourced. There's some jobs aren't even outsourced. They're in our backyard, but to prisoners, because they're the only ones that you can reasonably say, I'm going to pay you $1.15 an hour.
Right. Yep.
And you won't protest, right? You can't protest. And so this is our connection for us. Like, we are connected to this because these companies exist out in the world. You know what I mean?
I mean, you had the BP oil spill. Was it? Yeah, it was BP, right? You had the BP oil spill, and you had all these people out of work, fishermen who were more qualified to do the job, and they chose free prison labor. And you had people on the outside of the prison system protesting this, saying, why aren't you using these people, you know, who are, let's call them I don't know, what do you want to call them, the functioning part of society, you know, the so-called good guys, and you're not using them, and they're out of work. And they got called out on it publicly. It was huge. And they still were like, sorry, we're going to use this free labor. But when we allow that, it's going to continue, right?
But we can come back to this because, listen, we've just sat and watched a documentary called 13, right? You've got Mother Jones covering the prison strike, where essentially this exception in the 13th Amendment, which is the way that we started, says that prisoners can legally be put to work for little to no pay.
Right.
So really, this is embedded in our own Constitution. And these prisoners are going on strike demanding better working conditions. That's what they want. I mean, but so it's like, to my mind, it seems as if that this is one of those situations where we actually have something that was talked about in a documentary, but we see it in practice.
Right.
Officially.
Yeah. So can we wrap this up by talking about what we let me put it this way. I'm going to say something that I learned about myself that I wasn't willing to admit. And I don't know if anybody else had this experience or not. You know, I said before, the most shocking thing for me was ALEC, because I didn't know it existed. But even bigger than that was recognizing some of my own biases. And it's really kind of hard. It's hard for me to say it out loud because I don't want to say it out loud. But I think in order to get past it, you have to acknowledge things and you have to move on. And they did talk about it in the documentary. I can't remember the lady's name, but she said one of the biggest problems with this system that we see in our country is that it's not just the white folks that have bought into it. We as people of color have bought into it. And when she said that, I really thought like I had this epiphany moment. What she was specifically talking about was the way that, you know, the government and everyone has brainwashed us to criminalize the view of certain groups of people. So I had this light bulb go off in my own head, and I thought, yeah, I've been there. I have been there. I can tell you, and I'm not proud of it myself, that if I'm walking down the street and I'm alone as a woman and I see a sketchy man coming towards me, I can honestly say that, and I have felt guilty about it because I've never known where it has come from. But I can tell you that if it were a black man, I feel a little bit more threatened than if it were a white man. And I've never known why. I've never known why until I watched this. And I think I have, been slowly learning about it, recently. I think I have shared a little bit privately and publicly that my experience has been different from both of yours, given how I was raised, where I came from, who I dated, what I physically look like, being lighter skinned and people asking me, what are you? They don't really know that I'm mixed. They want to know, like, what are you made of? So people treat me a little bit differently than I think that they treat somebody that they look at and know for sure are Black. People have treated me differently if I've been next to a white man as opposed to a Black man. I've been treated differently. So I think my experience just as in general has been different than yours and Realz. Is that fair?
Well,
Probably.
you're a woman, and I wouldn't be upset if a woman feels she's walking on the street and she see a man.
No, yeah, but what I'm saying is part of this documentary was that we as people of color have bought into this figure of a threatening Black man. And I have been in situations where I have felt that way myself, and I have felt guilty about it. Because I have taken notice to the fact that not only was it a man, it was a Black man. I've been.
Well, I have to tell you that what you're saying isn't surprising, and it's understandable when, in fact, that much of what you've said initially, you didn't say race. You said a sketchy man. It's words like that. It's not even about code. It is precisely words like that police gets to use, and why they've been unwarrantedly stopping people of color. They can put some bullshit in articulate some nonsense. Oh, I noticed this man and he had his hands in his pocket, and I suspect he was holding a gun. I had drugs in his pocket. And that has been slowly eroding away people's rights to be free and unreasonable and unjustified searches. I mean, for me, I watching this, reason why I laughed when you said, you felt hopeless watching this documentary, because I felt hopeless. In some ways, I think I still do feel hopeless. I was happy that the documentary, one of the best things about the documentary, they had so much beautiful, happy pictures at the end of Black people and people of color and families enjoying themselves. If it had just ended just like that, I probably would have just melted away. Because one of the shocking things to me watching this documentary is not just the evolution and the always changing. It's how constantly in my own body, me as a Black man, I am a criminal. Not because I did anything, that I could be innocent. That the system is now set up in a manner that my innocence means nothing.
Right.
And go to jail. The police can come in here, pick me up, and put me in jail for several years. One of the more poignant points for me, it was I forget his name. I'm never good with names, surprisingly. It's that kid in New York City who was arrested for allegedly stealing a backpack and was in Rikers for 3 years.
Yeah.
And the mental degradation, because I know I go to jail, I would be crazy. And his mother found his body, and then she died of a broken heart last week or a week before. Mm-hmm. And that is not the exception. It has now become the rule that people go to prison, and the American prison system isn't about rehabilitation. People end up back in the circle. That I'm constantly in spaces that I constantly go around thinking, my God, like, I don't even let my friends come in here to pack a cigarette. I'll be like, look, I don't want any of this shit because I will be so mad. So mad. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and respectability politics will not save me. And that's the craziest bit. That nothing can save me. That the police can just simply pick me up, all over my body. I have no control over my agency, that my freedom isn't really free. That was the most shocking thing for me watching that documentary. That I can be taken up and put in prison and be broken all because of the color of my skin. And that is the saddest bit of reality. And it's not just the documentary largely based on Black male. For people of color, this is a sad and unfortunate reality. The darker you are, particularly Black and Latino and Native American people seem to bear the brunt of this for some particular reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but it's just the reality. The numbers bear that out. That's for me a very somber, sad thing.
Andreen?
I mean, I think, I don't know. I found the documentary exciting. Exciting because I feel like we're in a really sort of revitalized moment. Like, I mean, I think that, this is, I think one of the best outcomes of Trump's presidency is how Trump presidentially bid is that it.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You were just about to get these.
No. But I think I just think that it's really exciting. First of all, it was exciting to see all those people in the documentary put all these ideas together. And then it was also exciting to see people doing work. Because for me, I think what was really powerful about the documentary was how it was dismantling ideas, how it was dismantling systems, dismantling ideas that you can take with you now. Like you can take with you the system and the tools that you were taught in the documentary and look with fresh eyes at other places. And you can so in weird ways, I felt really hopeful, but I think it's also just because of the place in life that I'm at. I feel like I'm of the right age. I'm of the right age now where I feel like some of the ideas that I found comforting in the past no longer feels comforting, and that's okay. Like, this idea that, things are going to be okay. Like, you know what? There's a reason why people are upset. There's a reason why things are, people are enraged. There's a reason why we should be sort of vigilant all the time. Not just because we bought into the idea, because that was the thing too, like larger than the idea of who's a criminal or who's not a criminal. I started to really think about the criminal justice system, period. Why we bought into certain ideas about it. So like now when I'm looking at the proposition list for California, I'm like pouring through these things to try to really understand what this really means. Like what's the end gain here? Because now I feel like with that kind of a gaze, it's not okay for you to just look at systems and look at things that people propose and go, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I feel like now you have a kind of responsibility to sort of take a look at it seriously.
What is step 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yeah, no, like where is this going to go? Like, so for example, I was just listening to our podcast, Politically Reactive, and there's I think Rosa Clemente. I was listening to her interview, and she's talking about the choice between the choice between Trump and Hillary. And what I thought was so powerful was that she said overwhelmingly Americans aren't voting.
Yeah.
So it's like we've been sitting around worrying about the people who are actually going to have to choose between Hillary and Trump, when the reality is more people are not voting.
Yeah.
More people don't actually care about the system. And so she was talking about what could galvanize that group, right? Because most people feel like, I got to it's a choice between the lesser of two evils. And, I'm not so cynical. I do actually believe that Hillary's better than Trump. I don't believe by very much, but I do think that she's better. And so...
Anyway, we're not about that.
No, but I just think so what I thought was really interesting was to be able to sort of say, oh my God, you're right. I'm so focused on this end game, which I've sort of like been led to believe, right? That it hadn't occurred to me that, wait a minute, you're right. There's like a whole troops of people who won't vote at all because they just don't buy into the system. And there's something that can happen that could potentially galvanize that group. You know what I mean? Because they can believe now that something real is happening. Because look at what's happening.
John said it ain't you.
No, I'm not even talking. We're not talking about those people. We're just, and that's the thing. It's like, it's moving away from that. Obviously, if it was Gary Johnson, those people would register to vote too. So there's a group of people out there who don't find any part of this compelling.
Yeah, they just don't do it at all. They won't even make themselves a part of the process.
Yeah, they won't even make themselves a part of the process. And suddenly that was sort of like, oh. And I don't know. Obviously, I'm going to do my due diligence. I'm going to vote for who I need to vote for to make sure we don't go to hell in a handbasket. But I did start to look around
in
and
a
say,
basket.
okay.
I know. In a basket. I have that. Just a basket.
And a basket of deplorables. But I don't know. But I felt like to me the lesson to learn from Ava's documentary was to be as awake and as urgent as she is about her art and about participating and about the things that we do each day and the things that we care about and feeling like we're going to make those connections. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a really weird feeling that I have. I felt like that documentary was a reminder that there are always people who are going to be challenging our very humanity. And that we have to kind of be vigilant about that. We have to vigilantly push back at that. Like, that's what I kind of took from it too.
I want to thank you because, I was sitting here and, I feel, I'm going to say this, I hate Joseph Conrad. I think he's a fucking racist writer. But one of the best things he ever said was that the belief in the supernatural is unnecessary. Man alone is capable of all form of evil. And everybody who knows me know I love to watch true crime stories. And let me tell you, people. Yeah. Murder porn, I like to call it. But criminals don't have a racist DNA makeup. Any and everybody could kill. Okay? And I just know that humans are just evil. And the propensity for evil within human is crazy. And I say all this to say, like, watching that documentary, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? These people are just sitting around there and bargaining my humanity.
Yep.
Treating me like shit for no goddamn reason. Like they have been orchestrated. A small majority of people have been orchestrating the wholesale for a very long time. The wholesale dehumanizing of humans.
Yeah.
I mean, slavery in of itself is a crazy process. And then they continue, not just slavery, I mean, it's Native American people. And I mean, the history of the world is constantly filled with this. But apparently, America has taken it to a whole new level. They're always extra with everything. And, I felt hopeless and whatever. But you saying, what you just said, like, at this point, it's like, you have to fight back because it is sort of like, it is beneficial, as I said, like, it benefits them to dehumanize me. And it works well when I myself believe that I actually
participate.
You know what?
This is something. 1 second. Sorry. This is something like why you have to celebrate something like a Moonlight, right? Because that's the antithesis of what happens. Like I'm going to make a bid for seeing Moonlight because I think it's telling stories like that about young Black boys that are important for you to kind of be reminded that this is a human journey. We're not always portrayed that way. Our mistakes are meant to be stains on our character forever. That's it's in our DNA. But to be able to sort of come to a story where you are looking at that young person growing up with gentle, humane eyes, I think that that's powerful. And I think so that to me is like a refutation of some of the ideology that 13 talks about and explores. That to me is why I think something like Moonlight is so completely important and why I think it's actually why it's even happening now. I think something like a Black Lives Matter makes Moonlight possible, is that pushback.
Well, and I think we have to remember that we have made progress. We have made progress. And for me, one of the most eye-opening things that has ever happened in my life was my son watching Disney Channel and seeing a boy on there that looked like him. And his response to me just watching TV was, "He looks like me, Mommy."
Oh.
And at that moment, I knew we have made progress because when I was little, there was nobody for me to look at to say they look like me because people that look like me weren't on TV. I mean, we in this group right now are in our mid 30s to mid 40s. We probably don't know.
Speak for yourself, honey, girl. I'm in my
like it or not, are in your mid 30s. But the reality
I don't care
is,
what you say, okay? My gay self said I'm a twink.
Yeah, you be a twink. But we don't probably know as adults that many people of mixed race. You probably just don't. because that was still very taboo when I was being born in 1978. But I look at my oldest son, who was 21, and he didn't have quite as big of an issue with it. There were more people that looked like him, but I look at my youngest, and there are tons of people that look like him, and they're everywhere. And that in itself is progress. It is. It's a big deal.
And also, what you need to say is also, it is okay, people.
It's okay.
It is okay.
It's okay.
I mean, it's
look
okay
like this.
to look like that and be that person.
No.
There's nothing special or crazy about these people.
It just is. So
it's Trumpkins,
part of who we are. But you know what? This is something I want to close on, because
can we close and ask other people what are they going to take away from 13?
We can.
Can you all tell us a little bit about that too? But I mean, we've been talking about our takeaway. I'm curious if you guys could share that with us, and then when Janina finishes what she's saying, we might share a couple of what you all say too.
I do want to point out, because as I said at the beginning, that I really looked at when I was done watching this, and I did watch it twice. And I felt like this was a story on the evolution of slavery. And right now, where we stand today in the United States of America, there are more African Americans under prison surveillance than we ever had as slaves. And I want you to think about that and what that means. Really think about what that means.
Also, something we didn't mention, and it's very important. I think we sort of skirt around the issue when I said the war on drugs is more fiction and fact. It's far more fiction. Is that most of these people who are in prison are there for non-violent offense.
Yes.
And they're there for very small quantities of drugs. And in fact, the system in which it's set up from the government giving all this money and whatever, it rewards the police officers to go after drug abusers and not drug pushers.
Yeah.
And not the kingpins. There's a lot. I mean, like, there is
which is how it detrimentally affected Black women.
Right, and there's a lot more to this. We tried to tackle this, and this was like a Moby Dick. Basically, this topic is a Moby Dick for us to tackle.
No, we're just doing highlights.
Right, we're just doing highlights, and it's just three girlfriends just having a little tete-a-tete, But I encourage people to
maybe explore
to read more, explore more, and please, like, you're gonna encounter a whole bunch of pseudo bullshit science. Ignore that shit. I just read it for research purposes. But this is a very, very important topic, and it is important that all of us be educated on it. And I'm happy that 13 came out, that it put it out in a digestible fashion, that anyone can watch it and take in a lot of information and then move on from there and then do their own research and frame their understanding. You cannot leave that documentary and not look at your world quite differently. You have to. Hopefully. And for the better. But, my takeaway, for this is just like, I just want to say, white people and everybody out there, particularly white people, poor white people, do not be fooled by racist tropes. It is detrimental to your own central being. It is.
I don't know if that.
You may not think it is, but it is. You're pushing that agenda will only lead to your self-destruction. As you notice, your numbers are dwindling. And that is why. So you need to embrace the melanin. You need to embrace the people of color. And as someone said in the documentary, when Black lives matter, all lives matter. And white people, go take yourself and go to South Dakota and stop that fucking pipeline from happening, okay? Because apparently you can take over government land and armed
and nothing will happen to you.
So I need you.
Listen, there are people there. There are people there. There are people who are gonna lining up. You gotta line up and create a barrier.
Yes, I need white people to be there. People of color stay because you're gonna go to jail. Okay, apparently. So white people, If y'all want some federal land to take over in Paragon, show me your good stuff. Don't be like bragging on some fucking abandoned fisheries farm. Get your ass to the pipeline and show me what you got. Then I'll be all for white privilege.
You know what?
Okay.
Get your ass to the
So
polls.
I like some of the things that people are writing on our live feed. Emmanuel, thanks for writing. I did like all the Black joy at the end, but for me, it's a bookend of a process taken over the past few years that I've realized that the end of oppression is not going to end magically or suddenly, and that we have to be just aggressive in pushing back at those who perpetrate systems of oppression.
Amen.
Completely agree.
Your mama taught you right.
Yeah.
Emmanuel, your mama taught you right, and I'm mad you didn't get her to join us tonight. I'm just saying.
And lovely drama girl, the cynic in me sort of thinks that, like slavery, the prison system at some point no longer yields as much profit as it used to. So dealing with mass incarceration and prison has now become palatable. Entirely. It's not even cynical. They said it. You know what? But I think what's interesting is that, lovely drama girl, is that it was sort of external pushes that made it no longer palatable, right?
Yeah.
So it's the more sort of the general populace sort of push back at certain things, it no longer becomes profitable, and then they will move, right? So
But
realistically, people's morality don't change. Their profit motive is always there.
Right.
So what you have to do is you have to make less oppressive things profitable. I mean,
But
that
people-
sounds harsh, but that's probably
But
what
people,
it is.
when they push to end this prison system, we as a people are gonna have to do much more for us to integrate these people into our society, and we're gonna have to do much more as a society, because just putting these people out willy-nilly, as they did with slaves, is only going to cause more chaos and confusion, and for resurgence and for restructuring of the madness and changes to a different form.
Well,
So
yeah,
we
I
have
think
to
we have to do that. We have to be compassionate human beings. We have to
And
we have
educate
to
ourselves and
examine
educate.
ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
society has to make way for these people to fully integrate, make them full citizens again.
Because it does. Tony also, I didn't say Tony.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Tony just said, you know, he had a few things. First, he was just how ignorant I am to many topics regarding politics, government, race, history, etc. The money in politics was very, very eye-opening. And I would just like to use Tony as an example for a minute, in a good way, because I know sometimes I like to throw shade on Tony. But Tony and I have a lot of private conversations, and I appreciate the conversations that we share privately so much, because not only does it show me that people are willing to grow and to learn, I appreciate you trusting me to be the person that you choose to talk about things with and to help you learn and grow.
As you yourself learn and grow too.
I do. I do.
So this was fun. Thank you all for coming on board. We were so enraptured by this documentary that we just felt like we needed to share it with people we talk with weekly, really, about tennis.
Yeah. We'll be back on Sunday to discuss the WTA shit.
No,
Yes.
it's not. You can't say that. Look at you.
Oh, I am.
According
She says shit right. Says
According-
shit right, but mean like when her girl Kuzi wins, she won't be saying. She'll be like, "Oh
You
my
know
god!"
When Kuzi wins, we're gonna all be in deep shit, and I'm gonna wade in it and love it.
waiting it for all it's worth, you nutter.
So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank
as
y'all
much
for
as
listening. I
did.
mean, like, we may sound a little helter-skelter, but there was so much, and there's so much we can say on the topic.
I was scared.
However, we can always continue this discussion below in our comment section. Always tweet us. You know, Realz and all. We are never afraid to tackle all different manner of topics and whatnot, from the hot guys in tennis to the serious problems with people in general in the world. And also, you can also bring forth new dimensions of the situation that we didn't bring up at all in this
Love it.
thing.
Wanna keep
One
going.
of the things that I think Andreen and I spoke about is that there is lack of scholarship, as far as I'm aware, about women of color. It's in this system.
Yeah.
A lot of the documentary and books out there are written from the black male perspective, though we can extrapolate from that the issues.
Let
of
me write a
other
book.
groups.
Janina,
Yeah,
let
so
me
people there,
take
you
it.
know.
Take one for the team, Janina. Get it out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. So I really appreciate this, ladies.
That was good. It was good.
And
What a way to spend a Friday night talking about
Right.
13th.
exactly.
Thank you. We'll see you Sunday.
See you Sunday,
Yep.
y'all.
At what time are we doing it live, ladies?
No.
Who cares?
Live.
I mean, I don't know.
That was your anonymous.
No.
I need to prepare myself. I don't know. I can't keep up with the.
AKA, she got to watch real tennis. She got to watch. some
Listen,
tennis
I've been
tomorrow.
watching some tennis, but I got to prepare myself for Singapore. Like, I guess I should watch the semis, right? At
You
least.
should.
Oh my God.
Will I?
You know what? And here we are. Somehow the world always comes back to tennis.
I told you it would.
Well,
and we didn't even discuss James Blake.
Oh well. Oh, anyway. So,
All right. Good night,
okay.
guys.
Good night.
Good night, folks, and thank you for tuning in.
Ciao.
Ciao.